So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the almost penultimate instalment of our Naturetrek online roadshow. So this evening I'm joined by my colleague Paul Stanbury from the office, who will be speaking to you about Botswana. So that's a country that he knows particularly well, is looked after for many years, and I'm sure he'll enthuse you about all of our trips there. And we're also delighted to be joined by Gavin Opie from Gavin Opie Safaris and Nkonzi Camp, who we're very thrilled to have joining us, and to talk through sort of what's happening in Zambia at the moment and also the group holidays that we're operating there. So Paul will talk for about 20 minutes, then we'll hand over to Gavin, and then we'll also have a Q&A section at the end. So if you do have any questions, please do just pop them into the Q&A section there, that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. We'll try and answer a few of those as we go along online, but also we'll have that session at the end. So please do pass through any questions that you have. So we're very busy in the Naturetrek office at the moment, as we always are at this time of year. Pleased to see that spring is finally springing though, so we've got lots of sort of spring departures going out to Europe at the moment. But to say it's coming to the end of our online roadshows, and tomorrow we also have our final in-person roadshow at Arundel. So if anybody hasn't signed up for that yet and is local to the Arundel area, then please do just drop the office a line, because we'd love to see you there. But without further ado, I will just pass over to Paul, who'll start speaking to you about Botswana. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you very much, Georgie. Okay, good evening, everybody. Just give me 2 seconds while I share the screen and get the presentation up and running, hopefully. Right, hopefully that looks all right. Does that look all right to you, Georgie?
That looks great, Paul. Great.
Good, excellent. Right, excellent. Right, we'll kick off then. Well, yeah, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's great to have so many of you listening. Yeah, I'm going to kick off our presentation with a few slides and a few thoughts on Botswana, one of Africa's finest wildlife and safari destinations. And a country Naturetrek has been operating trips to for over 30 years now. There are 2 main itineraries to Botswana. One we call Botswana's Desert and Delta, and this is a shortish safari of 10 days in total, 7 nights of mobile camping, based around the edge of the Okavango Delta, on the edge of Chobe National Park and Moremi. So we fly into Morn. It's 7 nights of mobile camping, more of which I'll show you in a bit, and then out again. And then we have a longer trip called Botswana's Highlight, and that starts in Livingstone in Zambia. So you can see the Victoria Falls and relax a little bit after the long flight, and then makes its way through Botswana, through Chobe National Park and Savuti, again to the Kwai and Moremi area. And that's 9 nights of mobile camping, 2 nights in a nice lodge in Livingstone, 9 nights of mobile camping, and then out from there. So for those who aren't familiar with the geography, Botswana is right down in southern Africa, to the north of South Africa, and to the east of Namibia, west of Zimbabwe. And we travel to the country via Johannesburg in South Africa. There are no direct flights to Botswana at present. So we normally use a direct British Airways service from Heathrow, where the connecting flights, of course, to get down to Heathrow, down to Johannesburg, and then from Johannesburg we hop onto a smaller flight up to either Morn or Livingstone, depending on where your holiday starts. And the flight from Joburg to Morn is only a couple of hours or so, so it's not long. Morn is the gateway to the fabulous Okavango Delta. As I mentioned, Livingstone is the gateway to the Victoria Falls. So Botswana, why travel there and why visit this amazing country? Well, it's one of the very best safari destinations anywhere in Africa. The country has protected, so they've protected nearly 30% of its land in national parks, game reserves, and other conservation designations. There's only 2 million people in the entire country. This is a country the size of France and Germany combined. So it still has a lot of wild and remote landscapes full of absolutely fabulous wildlife. It's primarily a desert country, but in the northwest corner you have the waters of the Okavango River coming down from Angola, which creates the Okavango Delta, one of the great natural wonders of the world. So on Botswana, we like Botswana trips. We like to take you out into the wilds and give you the opportunity to camp out in the wilderness. And there's really no finer way to explore the Botswanan parks and enjoy its wildlife than under canvas, away from the lodges, away from the other tourists, and surrounded by the wildlife and the sounds of the African bush. We use private campsites, so the Naturetrek groups are the only ones in the campsite. We use comfortable tents. You don't need to worry about doing any of the camp chores yourself. There's a camp team of cooks and other staff who will set up the tent, do all the cooking, do all the maintenance, etc. All you need to do is enjoy yourself. So the tents are simple, but they're perfectly comfortable. You have proper beds, mattresses, pillows, and your own little ensuite bush bathroom with a bucket shower and a bush loo, open to the wilds. It's simple, but it's perfectly comfortable, and it does mean you're right out in the heart of the wilderness, surrounded by all this fabulous wildlife. The vehicles we use in Botswana are open-sided, so they're great for both wildlife viewing and for photography. They have stepped rows of seats, normally 3 rows of seats as shown in this vehicle here. And we only put 2 people per row, so great visibility. It's normally 2 people per row, 1 person sitting next to the driver in the front, and then everybody rotates, so it would get equal chance in the front and the back. Great for those who want to take photographs, and great for those who just are keen on looking and enjoying the wildlife. This area, northern Botswana, is a mix of wetlands and vast flat bush covered in leadwood and mapani trees, and cut by rivers and marshlands. Botswana is home to about 600 or so species of bird and 170 or so species of mammal. It's famous for its big herds of elephant, and this is a common animal that you'll see throughout your safari. In particular, we tend to do most of our Botswana safaris in our autumn, so August, September, October, November, which is the dry season down in southern Africa, when the water's at its most restrictive, and the elephants and the other game are often crowded around the waterholes. A typical day on safari in Botswana would start just before first light with a cup of coffee and some water in your bowl outside your tent so you can freshen up. Then you'll hop into the safari vehicle and head out at first light in the cool of the morning, when the animals and the birds are at their most active. You'll spend a bit of time, a few hours on safari, return back to camp for a brunch. Then there's time to siesta, the heat of the day away, you can relax, watch the animals over the floodplains, have a nap back in your tent. Then you head out again later on in the afternoon, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and again out to look at the animals and birds during the cooler hours of the afternoon, when things start to become more active again. As well as elephants, there are huge herds of buffalo which crowd around the water holes and the remaining water holes and the rivers. And they're joined by herds of zebra. These are Burchell's zebra. It's plain zebra species, but Burchell's zebra race. and an interesting variety of antelopes as well. One of the most beautiful, without doubt, is the greater kudu. This is a male kudu with beautiful spiral antlers. One of the larger antelopes, common throughout much of southern Africa. And a bit rarer is that two-necked giraffe, which we don't see very often on our safaris, but you might be lucky to come across one. Though the species down here, or the race down here, is the southern giraffe. And giraffes are common throughout most of the Botswanan game reserves, and it's wonderful to see these incredibly graceful animals striding across the landscape. And wherever you've got such a high density of prey animals, then of course you've got a large number of predators. Botswana is home to a very healthy population of lions. There are leopard here. They're not quite so easy to see in Botswana as they are in Zambia. So I'm sure Gavin will tell you a bit more about the leopards of the South Luangwa a little bit later on. But you may be lucky to see a leopard on a night drive, or maybe lounging around, relaxing in the heat of the day up in a tree such as this. And Botswana is one of the places to go if you want to see the wild dog, the African wild dog, or painted dog, as it's also called. So the Moremi and Okavango areas are home to one of Africa's highest densities of wild dog, and they do range over a huge area during most of the year. Our groups are typically pretty lucky, I would say. Most groups do see dog, but it's being wildlife. It's nothing's ever guaranteed. But they become a little easier to see when they're denning between June and September time with their pups, and they don't range over such a huge area. So there's a good population in Moremi and the Okavango, and you stand a good chance of seeing this amazing animal on a trip around the country. And wherever you've got the prey and the predators, of course, you've got scavengers as well, and spotted hyenas are common throughout the game reserves in Botswana, and you'll certainly see cackling bands of hyenas on your safari. This is one thing you won't see in Botswana: are big crowds of safari vehicles. Fortunately, Botswana is still going for the high cost, low numbers form of tourism. So the camps and the lodges out there are typically small, especially if you're out in the bush camping, as we do. You don't see the big crowds of safari vehicles as you do in some of the other African parks. The bird life is equally abundant and diverse. As I mentioned, there's about 615 or so species of bird that have been recorded in the country, which is not bad really, considering it's a landlocked, primarily a desert country. It's not going to get to the numbers of your Colombias and Ecuadors, but 600 odd is a decent number, and there's some really nice species to look out for as well. This is the white-browed robin chat, or Huguenin's robin, and it's one of the familiar sounds in the morning is wake up to the very fluty song of the white-browed robin chat. An equally beautiful bird, the lilac-breasted roller, is common throughout much of southern Africa, and they adorn all the bushes and the telegraph poles in the region. So they're commonly seen, but a lovely bird to see. A few more of the species to look out for. We've got top left is the southern bishop, one of the weavers that molt into their breeding plumage during the wetter months of the year. To the right, there's the Kori bustard, one of the world's heaviest flying birds, and often seen patrolling out over the grassy plains. Bottom left, martial eagle, one of the largest of the eagles, and bottom right is shaft-tailed wider, another member of the widow weaver wider family, during the non-breeding season they're brown stripy birds, a bit sparrow-like, but in the breeding season they molt into this wonderful variety of colours and shapes. And beautiful carmine bees as well. Again, Gavin will show you more carmines, I'm sure, for the South Luangwa, where they nest during the drier months of the year. But you'll see plenty of carmine beetles in Botswana as well. And something a little bit rarer, the wetlands of Okavango are home to wattled cranes. And again, I mentioned Zambia with Gavin, which is the home of the walking safari, or walking safaris were first pioneered. But you can also do a little bit of walking in Botswana, not in the game reserves like Moremi, but you can walk in the concession areas outside the game reserve. So our tours usually include a couple of nights, 2 or 3 nights in one of the concessions, like the Kwai concession, where you can do walking safaris, which is great if you're keen on seeing some of the smaller animals and in particular the birds. It's great to be on foot when you're out bird watching. And then the other advantage of being in the concessions is that you can go out after dark and do a little bit of spotlighting as well. So as well as enjoying the wonderful African night sky, you can head out with your spotlight and look for some nocturnal denizens of the region. This is the time to see the cats. That leopard is primarily a nocturnal hunter, so this is the time to see them. You'll also hopefully see a range of other species as well that come out after dark. Crested porcupine, South African crested porcupine, the spring hare, jennets and civets. There's some lovely birds, pennant-winged nightjars, there's a male with the very long extended primary feathers, spectacular to see in flight in particular. And then all of our Botswana safaris can be extended. So if you want to extend your tour, if you can fly deeper into the Okavango Delta. And the Okavango, it covers over 15,000 square kilometers of land in the northwest corner of Botswana. And it's one of the world's very few inland deltas and one of the great natural wonders of the world. And it's a magnet for all the animals and birds of the region. And there are camps dotted around within the Okavango, most of which are only accessible by light aircraft. So you'll hop on a small plane such as this in Morn, fly maybe 20 minutes, half an hour out into the delta over this amazing landscape of marshlands and rivers and islands. It really is a spectacular thing to see, and really part of the experience of going into the Okavango is the flight out over the delta, over herds of red lechwe, and quite often see herds of elephant as well from the aircraft as you're flying into your camp. We use a couple of camps, several camps in the Okavango. There's a Kidjara camp, there's Moremi Crossing camp. We try to use camps within the wetter areas of the reserve or the delta, like keep water during even during the drier months. This will give you a different experience from the main safari. The main safari is essentially vehicle based, and you're watching your birds and wildlife from the vehicle. If you're in the wetter areas of the delta, then you can hop into a mokoro and do some boat trips. And the accommodation is also it's a step up from the mobile camping, so a little bit of luxury to end your trip with. As I mentioned, you can hop into a mokoro, which is the traditional dugout canoe, and head out into the waterways and the flooded savannah here, and enjoy a range of wildlife from the small dragonflies and insects and other small creatures up to elephants and hippos and other larger mammals. The bird life out here, of course, is incredibly diverse. African chicanas are common in the region, also known as lily trotters for their habit of walking across on top of the lilies, as this one's doing. We've got herons, both great and small. We've got Goliath heron here, the largest heron in the world, and the black heron doing its umbrella fishing technique, where it creates a little patch of shade with its wings which both attracts the fish into the shade and also cuts down on the glare on the water, allowing the heron to pick off the fish with ease. There are plenty of kingfishers out here. We've got malachite kingfisher top left, grey-headed kingfisher top right, in the African pygmy kingfisher bottom left, and the biggest of all, the giant kingfisher bottom right. And one of the key birds that, and there are two animals that people want to see when they head out into the Okavango. One is a bird, one is a mammal. Pell's fishing owl here is without doubt the key bird that people want to see. They live out in the heart of the delta, but they have favourite trees, quite often jackleberry trees that they will roost in, and the guides often know where they are going to be spending the day. And then the other one is the rare Sitatunga antelope, an antelope of the wetter areas, and they live in the heart of the Okavango. Difficult to see, but there are some areas out in the delta where you stand a reasonable chance of seeing them. And as well as the big, there's also the small. So oozing around in Makoro, you're looking out for the little painted reed frogs and other wildlife as well. But quickly before I hand over to Gavin, I'm just going to quickly show a few images of another Botswana tour that we do. And this one's down to the drier region of the country, down to the central Kalahari Game Reserve, miles away now from the influence of the Okavango Delta. And it's a very different landscape. Here we're in primarily a desert environment, and a different variety of mammals and birds that are adapted to that harsher, drier conditions. So we've got gemsbok here, one of the commonest antelopes. But we go down and explore this region in February, March time, just after the rain. So it is the time of the year when, rain's permitting, the desert bursts into life, and you see this wonderful colour of carpet of colour on the landscape. So springbok is the other common antelope down in the central Kalahari Game Reserve. Gemsbok and springbok being the two commonest. As well, you've got zebra and you also blue wildebeest as well. And again, plenty of game. So you've got the cats to look out for, including the black maned lion of the Kalahari. This is also cheetah land. Cheetahs love the wide open spaces of the Kalahari, and they prey on springbok and steinbok and the smaller antelope. And the bird life down here is also a little different to what you get further up north. So if you want to extend a trip to the Okavango down into the Kalahari to see something a little bit different, we can do that without a problem. This is a pale chanting goshawk and a beautiful violet-eared waxbill as well. And some rarer mammals. The deserts out here are home to bat-eared foxes, very endearing, small fox that you've got a good chance of seeing, but you have to be exceptionally lucky to see the aardvark. And they do occur down here. They're strictly nocturnal. We've had groups that do see them from time to time. Although if you're particularly keen on seeing aardvark, then I'd suggest going down to South Africa on our South Africa's Rare Mammals trip, where to date, touch wood, they've not failed to see aardvark in and around the Kimberley area. And we can always extend a holiday to other areas. If you want to extend your trip to a couple of weeks or more, then time at the Victoria Falls is well worthwhile. And we use a very nice lodge there called Waterbury Lodge. And Victoria Falls, you can go to Mosi-oa-Tunya National Park, which is next door, and see the only rhino white rhino in Zambia. So I will end there with a sunset shot over the Okavango. And if you have any questions at all, please do let me know. Either post them in the questions online, or and we'll try and answer them later on in the evening. So I'll unshare my screen and now pass you over to Gavin, who will take you to Zambia. Hopefully, I can stop the screen sharing.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
A lot of a lot of differences and a lot of similarities between Botswana and my home in South Luangwa.
Yeah, I'm pressing stop share on my screen, and it's not doing anything.
Yeah.
So just technology. You are screen sharing.
Yes, it's telling me somebody else is sharing.
That'll be me. But it's currently not allowing me to stop sharing. Let me try again. Oh, there we go. Worked. There we go. All right.
Great, well done.
Okay, sorry about that, Gavin. I shall pass over to you.
That's fine. So, what's it telling me to do now? Let me see if I can have any success. I think so. So yeah, good evening, everybody.
Sorry, Gavin, it's not sharing at the moment.
Is it not?
No, can still see you at the moment.
Oh, this is a I see. There was one more button to click.
That is looking better.
There's a few little gremlins there at the top of the screen. They should disappear in a second.
Yeah, that's looking good now, Gavin.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody.
Right.
So yes, as mentioned before, my name.
Sorry, Gavin. Can you just move if you've got the box is slightly covering your screen there? Is it possible to move that up?
As far as I can tell, it will go away on its own if I don't scroll anything over it.
Perfect. Okay.
So yeah, give it a second and we'll see if it will go. It's not really interfering with anything other than the headline, and it says
We've just got the title missing at the moment. Yeah, so it's okay at the moment, but
why is it not disappearing? Sorry about that. It doesn't seem to be disappearing, but hopefully it'll go away soon and won't interfere too much. Anyway, as mentioned before, my name is Gavin. I'm currently talking to you from Wiltshire in England. But I spent most of my adult life working and guiding in Zambia. That was home for us for many, many, many years. And together with my wife, who's an archaeologist and an expert in the early hunter-gatherer communities of the area. We were raising a family there up until a couple of years ago when we moved our little girl back to the UK during COVID. Our schools and everything shut down there, and so that's our story. But we are very much Zambian-based, Zambian at heart, and it's still home. And one day we will be back there full time again. So I know that a lot of you will probably have traveled extensively around Africa, but Zambia is probably one of the lesser known countries in Africa for safaris, which is a bit of a shame because it is also one of the most beautiful and one of the most blessed in terms of variety and quality of safari destinations. You can see there from the political map, it's sort of neither fish nor fowl, doesn't quite fit into East Africa or Southern Africa or Central Africa. Bordered by 8 neighbors, Zambia has a very, very proud history of being an extremely peaceful nation. It was a British colony up until 1964, where it was peacefully handed over to the first Republican President, Kenneth Kaunda. And it hosted a lot of other liberation movements during the struggle for independence. But fortunately for Zambia, it avoided the violence that did erupt in a lot of its neighboring countries. So very welcoming, very safe, and regularly voted one of the safest countries in Africa to visit. So just to give you a little bit of a picture as to what you're actually sort of getting into, we have a bit of the vegetation map of Africa here, and we are in this big kind of green dense area over here. And what that depicts is the Central African Plateau, which is very, very high elevation, and covered very much in a form of savanna woodland called Miyombo woodland, which is a very, very interesting type of forest. But then within Zambia, you have two very, very notable valleys, and you can see them in terms of the type of vegetation that occurs there. The first one is this kind of archway over here. That's your Zambezi River, which forms our southern border with Zimbabwe. And then coming into it over here, this little streak of light green is the Luangwa Valley. You can see its proximity to Lake Malawi, Lake Tanganyika, which are the Great Lakes of the Great Rift Valley system. The Luangwa is related to the Rift Valley system, but its formation is actually older. And the Luangwa River has been flowing for longer than what those lakes have been formed. So what this is telling us here is that it's got a very wide range of forest land and grassland. Unlike most of the Central African plateau where it's all Miombo, here we've got a rich mixture of riverine forest, Mapani woodland, which is very nutrient rich, and a little bit of Miombo woodland interspersed in some of the hilly areas. So a little bit of an overview of what the valley looks like. As I said, it is related to the Great Rift Valley system, and it is about 60 kilometers wide, has two big escarpments on either side of it and a flat valley floor. And through this runs the mighty Luangwa River. It doesn't look so mighty over there because that is a picture taken during the dry season. But what this river has done is it's meandered its way across this landscape for millions and millions of years, flooding in the rain season. We have heavy torrential downpours from sort of December, January, February, and then it dries up from April and gets very, very dry through to September and October. And the Luangwa is one of the last main river systems in sub-Saharan Africa that has not been dammed or subjected to any hydroelectric schemes or weirs or anything like that. So the beauty of the Luangwa is it still flows to its seasonal rhythms. And this is very, very important because it strengthens and upholds the mechanisms that cause this to be such a fantastic wildlife destination in the first place. You may be able to see in the background over there some water sort of spread out into the bush. Let me try and point it out. These are oxbow lagoons that are formed by the river, which has changed its course over the years. And what happens is when the rains come, the river rises up, floods into those oxbow lagoons, deposits very, very nutrient-rich silt, and then it subsides back down into its smaller dry season version over here, leaving these wonderful lagoons and pans and shallow grasslands behind, on extremely nutrient-rich soil, a lot of water, and a lot of scope for supporting the wildlife that lives there. Zambia, as I said, slightly lesser known destination. And so a little bit about how to get there. You can fly directly into Lusaka, our capital. There are several airlines that come directly in, most notable being Qatar and Emirates. We do a couple of Naturetrek group tours towards the end of the year. And invariably, if you were on one of those, you would probably come in with Emirates. But if you were to come with us on a tailor-made safari, you would probably have, there's various options of getting here. So fly into Lusaka, you're getting there kind of mid-afternoon, and then catching the connection on one of the local airline services to Mfui, which has the airport over there, just on the edge of South Luangwa National Park. And we will pick you up in our vehicles, and the adventure starts straight away. You're right into the very thick of the action as soon as you get there. So once we pick you up at the airport is there where the little W is on the compass, and it takes us about an hour driving through the main game management areas into where we cross the river into the main South Luangwa National Park, and from there a night drive into camp. And I want to sort of stress just the sort of vastness and the immense wilderness of this area. You're going into the South Luangwa National Park, which is of a size of 9,000 square kilometers, which, to give you an idea, is about half the size of Wales. Um, and then the Luangwa River system and valley system itself extends for about 120,000 square kilometers, which again is about half the size of Great Britain. And so this is the area that you'll be venturing into. A wonderful, almost untouched wilderness, apart from a scattering of camps around the main gate area over here, and a few wild bush camps up into the middle of the park. You can see where we are up there. It takes us about an hour and a half from the park entrance to reach our base on the edge of the seasonal Mushilashi River. Again, we prefer to operate away from the crowds. Nkonzi camp is a seasonal camp. We only are open during the dry season. We want to get to where you're not going to see a lot of other safari vehicles. It is a really true wilderness experience. And so the style of the camp is also a tented camp. We erect it every year in April, May, and drop it down again in the first weeks of October. So a 5-month season. So you could get an idea of what the main dining area looks like over there. Fully stocked bar, a nice lounge area, and dining area all under canvas over there. And again, the accommodation in a very, very similar vein. We want to be able to get away from where there's a lot of infrastructure, where the big roads are. And so our lodge is tented, but we have a sort of a thatched lapa thrown over, all using local materials, and a little private lounge area off the side where people can relax. Very often, September, October, it does get a little bit warmer. So a nice shaded area where you can spend some time reading a book, catching up with your photographs or diary or whatever you like. And then inside the tent, all the sort of creature comforts which you might need to make you feel comfortable, but still the thrill and the adventure of a safari under canvas in one of the wildest and most remote areas in Africa. Tents are set up as either a double or a twin. They are fitted. They do have mains electricity. We have a solar powered system that provides power to the tents. So fans for during the night, mainline lights, and then you also are able to charge camera batteries and even phones. Or there's not really much point because you're not going to be getting very much signal and talking to anybody out there. But those facilities are available. And then each tent is fitted with its own custom-built bush bathroom, flush loos, but everything again built out of local materials that we buy from the local villages outside the park, thatching grass, reed mats, and then water is supplied on demand, hot water and cold water jugs for the basins, and then fed by the on-demand bucket shower. Again, this is just part and parcel of the magic of being out in the middle of nowhere. And you will arrive in camp in the dark and spend your first night under the amazing African skies. We're in an area where our nearest neighbor is another tiny bush camp like ours, over 3.5 kilometers away. So absolutely zero noise or light pollution, and the opportunity to really immerse yourself in the wilderness. Safari activities start the very, very next day. We conduct our drives in open Land Rovers. The idea is that we can get into the bush and you are not obstructed from any of the views. Birds above you, wildlife around you. It's an up close and personal safari. The camp itself only holds 10 guests, and much like on the Botswana trips, we will not put more than 2 people in a row on the car. And so that means that we are running 2 vehicles on our group trip when we have 10 Naturetrek people in. And the guiding will be done by myself. and by one of our local guides. This is a picture of Moses, very proud. He's our most recent uh, recipient of the coveted driving guide's license. So the group generally tends to split up, and that works out very, very handily, not just for comfort in the vehicles and making it easier for photographic opportunities, but it also allows us to mix the groups up a little bit. Sometimes we find people slightly different interests. Some people want to go off and search for lions all day. Other people are a lot more enthusiastic about the birds. And because we have a little bit of a split up and we can send people off in different directions, we're able to kind of cover everybody's expectations and meet everybody's specific interests. Added into that, Paul did mention earlier, South Luangwa, home of the walking safari. It's a label that we take a lot of pride in. Up until the 60s and the 70s, it was thought it was far too dangerous to do something like a walking safari. But one of the safari pioneers in Zambia, a guy called Norman Carr, worked on it, and he came up with a system where you can walk with the big wildlife, with a wildlife parks ranger who is armed, and a safari guide who will lead you through the area. And so we take pride in believing that we are the ones who invented the walking safari. There may be a few other places out there that will dispute that, but it's one of our legends and something that we really love to do. So again, if you're on one of the Naturetrek group tours that come to us for 7 nights, the opportunity to do a walking safari will most certainly be there. And again, it will be a matter of splitting up the group into different interests. We will be talking to everybody each and every night about who wants to go where, how you want to do it, to make sure everybody gets the most out of the experience and their time in the Luangwa. The giraffe we're looking over there is a common animal in the Luangwa. And unlike the southern giraffe that you were looking at in the Botswana photos, this is a unique subspecies known as the thorny-croft giraffe. It's related to the East African species rather than the southern, so it's thought to be a subspecies of the Maasai giraffe. But a noteworthy a herbivore in the area, and something definitely worth seeing, something a bit different, and that you won't really see many other places. And the Luangwa, in its very, very isolated and remote areas, home to a few such species. The crochet zebra is another one that's a bit different to what you'd see in Botswana and the rest of Southern Africa. Again, it is a subspecies of the plain zebra, and while not uniquely endemic to the South Luangwa, it only occurs through Zambia and northern Malawi and southern Tanzania. So another little bit of a specialist herbivore for those seasoned safari goers who may think they've seen it all. And then probably the oddest of the lot is our locally endemic wildebeest. It occurs through the northern parts of South Luangwa National Park and up into the North Luangwa. And as you can see, it looks a little bit different from the wildebeest that you'd see in East Africa or Southern Africa. A weird sort of pinkish color, and quite a bit bigger than some of the other wildebeest species. Another one definitely worth looking out for, out of the dozens of different mammal species that you can see in South Luangwa. But for me, probably one of the most special things to see out there is the scope of the landscape, and with it the size of the herds. For me, that is a sign of being in a truly wild area. The fact that you still have these massive herds of megafauna wandering around. We have a herd of about 400 buffalo that comes through the waterholes opposite Nkonzi. When you get down to the river, particularly in the dry season, when they're congregating in bigger and bigger numbers, it's not impossible to see buffalo of several thousand strong. That's not an exaggeration. They have been spotted by air, taking up a space of about 8 kilometers herds making their way looking for water in the dry season. So it really is a spectacular sight. And of course, as I said, lots of similarities to Botswana, where you have got this huge, massive congregation of herbivores and wildlife. You're always going to get the predators to go with it. The biggest, of course, and one of the big draw cards is the lion. South Luangwa is home to a very, very good population of lion. The animals themselves look a little bit different as well. It's purely genetic, lighter manes, and maybe not quite as heavily maned as your Botswana and East African lions. Very, very impressive animals still. Extremely territorial, and Nkonzi is sort of settled into the corner of a pride territory that belongs to a pride called the Nsolo 2. And we're very excited last year, after being through a few difficult years, we've got a coalition of females that have come in and have settled into the area. And we spent a lot of last season observing mating pairs. So very much looking forward to getting back into the bush in June, July to see if there are any new cubs around. Likelihood very high. Chances of seeing lion, particularly if you're on one of the group tours and at the end of the season, very, very good. With all the plains game being forced down to the ever dwindling water sources, it becomes easy pickings for the big predators, and our opportunities to see them in action are pretty good. One of the activities that we will do for anybody who's with us for a length of time is a picnic drive out in the park where we spend 12 hours exploring the furthest reaches of the park. You know, wherever there's a road, we'll get there. And during a typical day like that, we'll pass through about 5 or 6 different lion territories. So, yep. And as you can see, water, the river, etc., proves no barrier to the lions. This is their natural habitat, and very, very successful species in their area. As the opening slide suggested, one of the acronyms given to, or one of the names given to the Luangwa Valley is Valley of the Leopard. It's something that puts a little bit of pressure on us as guides because, as you all know, the leopard is a highly secretive and very, very elusive animal. The Luangwa population is recognized as one of the highest concentrations of leopards in Africa. There's a carnivore research group in the Luangwa that has done a lot of research on lions, dogs, but have secretly admitted to me that they struggle with leopards because although they have an idea of where they are, where they're moving around, to actually get shots and get hard data on them as the other species do is a little bit difficult. Nevertheless, we have their reputation for a reason. The habitat is absolutely perfect for them. Generally, what you'll find is you'll have a female with a territory of about 2.5 square kilometers because the area is so rich for them. They don't need very big territories. And then typically you'll have a male with a territory that overlaps about 3 or 4 female territories. So we've got at least 3 individuals that roam around Nkonzi camp. But of course, as we sped further afield in our drives, we go through absolutely magnificent leopard habitat. And again, we have to stress, can never ever make any guarantees, but we do see a lot of leopard, and invariably we get success on finding these magnificent cats on our safaris. And then probably one of the most iconic predators in Africa at the moment, again, wild dog. This is something that we are extremely excited about in the Luangwa. I've been there for 20 odd years, and there was a time where this extremely rare species, estimated to be between 6,000 and 7,000 left in the wild. You know, we'd be very, very lucky if we saw 1 sighting a year. Now, through a lot of the collaborative work with our NGOs in the area, numbers have picked up magnificently. through the anti-poaching and research work that has been done. And the researchers have identified at least 3 packs that are drinking and hunting around the Nkonzi area last year, although they do roam and they do wander around. Again, they den between sort of June and July, and then become more active again in September, October. And ironically, different to Botswana, that's when we see more of them. Because they have areas that they can get to den where they can't be reached. And we don't like to follow them on foot. We don't want to disturb them. Once the pups are out of the den, that's when they start getting active again. And September, October, fantastic opportunities for finding these dogs in our areas. South Luangwa does allow night drives within the park. So as you can see there, good opportunities to get out and see the interaction between the various species at night. Lots of little interesting smaller creatures. And then of course mixed in with the massive herds of big species that we have as well. Wouldn't be worth talking about the Luangwa if we didn't mention the bird life. Absolutely spectacular birding area. I think we're now recognized up to 460 species have been sighted in the Luangwa. Lovely photo of the African fish eagle there, which is very, very common throughout the Luangwa, not only along the river, but also along the smaller lagoons. And an interesting species to observe, as it's one of the behaviors we see a lot around our areas is its kleptoparasitism, where rather than catching fish of its own, it does a very good job of stealing fish from other fish eating birds, such as that saddle-billed stork up on the right-hand side over there. The lilac-billed roller, lilac-breasted roller over there on the left-hand side, also a very common but very spectacular bird, always worth mentioning. But again, towards the end of the season in Luangwa, some of the more rarer species that you could look out for, like the broad-billed roller, and then also in the more forested areas, things like the racket-billed roller. Various species of bee eaters down the bottom there, and other very interesting birds of interest. You can see some African skimmers. So a lot of birds with specialized and adaptive behaviors and features that keep the birders very, very, very busy. And as promised, the famous carmine bee eater. I mentioned earlier how the river is not dammed, and what this means is that it provides one of the last havens for carmine bee eaters to breed. These are intra-African migrants. They come down from north of the equator within Africa, and what they're relying on is the river having flooded and cut away banks on the river, and then subsided again, so that they have these tall, straight banks of riverbed, and the carmines come down in their thousands and bore into these riverbanks and breed there. So if you're coming in September, October, spectacular flocks of hundreds and thousands of these little birds in the air at the various breeding areas. And of course, as we are out and about at night, fantastic owling as well. An example of our smallest, the scops on the left-hand side there, the African scops, and the Varroa eagle owl on the right-hand side, with everything in between, including Pell's. And we do see them from time to time, and lots of various other interesting ones, particularly my favorite, the white-faced or the white-faced scops owl. So a lot for the birders to do, as well as the big mammal hunters. I just wanted to take this opportunity to sort of reach out and you know, give credit to a lot of the organizations that work behind the scene that keep these wildlife areas so good, and also just you know, emphasize how important it is that tourism does reach our areas, because most of these organizations are funded by the tourism dollar. So for every night that somebody spends in one of our camp, $5 is donated to each of these organizations, and that goes a long way to helping the work that they do. First one being Conservation South Luangwa, who work a lot in the law enforcement, supporting national parks, anti-poaching. They also have a canine dog unit, believe it or not, an anti-poaching dog unit. and have various programs like chili fences, etc., to see that it's up there to mitigate human-wildlife conflict. Chippendale Wildlife Education Trust works hand in hand with the local schools in the area, sensitizing kids to the importance of conserving their habitat, educating them as to the various employment opportunities they may find, and also identifying young kids who are vulnerable of losing out on education, and finding sponsors for them. And then finally, the Zambia Carnival program, which we talked about a little bit earlier. This is a research unit that has been studying the lions, the dogs, and other carnivores like hyenas for the last 20 years. And just a little bit of a stat there to show how the tourism dollar helps. They employ vets, and they are able to dart animals that have got snares, not just carnivores, but elephants, anything that picks up a wild snare. And this is one particular dog where you can see they saved it from a wire that was wrapped around its neck. And subsequently, that dog has fathered 272 other wild dogs in the following 5 years, and was responsible for another 17 new packs that dispersed into the Luangwa. So, although safaris are a lot of fun and very, very rewarding, they also give a lot back to wildlife and the communities too. So, I hope I have given you a lot of good food for thought for visiting the Luangwa. And if you needed any more encouragement, there's always a nice cold beer waiting for you when you arrive. And thank you very much for your time, and we hope to see you in Zambia soon.
That's great. Thank you very much, Gavin. So yeah, really fantastic insight to Zambia, and I particularly enjoyed hearing about those conservation programs at the end there. So important, the benefits of ecotourism everywhere that we go to with Naturetrek, and it's a really important part of our ethos. So yeah, it's brilliant to highlight that as well. So thanks for doing that. So now we'll just go straight into the Q&A then. So we've had a few questions that have been popping in during the course of those presentations, but do feel free to ask a few more questions if any have popped into your brain now. So first of all, Wendy commented that Botswana and Zambia both addictive. Sorry, she's been to Zambia 3 times and Botswana 5 and had some fantastic sightings. And I think that's something that's that's familiar to a lot of our guests who've ever been to these places. You do get the bug, we've got so many people who've gone time and time again. So yeah, really lovely to hear all of that as well. First of all, just onto the questions. So we had Alison Parnell who just asked about mosquitoes. Paul, is that a problem in Botswana generally, or something we should be worried about?
I personally never found them to be a problem. You do need to take malaria prophylactics for Botswana. In the Okavango, I guess early morning, evenings, there will be some around, but I've never found personally to be great clouds of them. A little bit of repellent, long sleeves. That's absolutely fine. And yeah, for me, it's always been the same in the South Luangwa as well. But I'll let Gavin answer for Zambia.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, always the best advice is to speak to your doctor about malarial prophylaxis. South Luangwa and most of Zambia is in a recognized malaria area. But I think what probably also applies to your Botswana destinations as well is that we are very, very far away from any big sort of human population. And so what that means is there's not a lot for the mosquitoes to eat. And so although they are around and the habitat, you certainly do need to take all the normal precautions. It's not a serious worry or a serious issue that would put you off. The mozzies are around. There are other insects that bite you, so do come prepared with some good repellents, long sleeves. It won't stop you from having an absolutely fantastic time.
Thank you both, that's brilliant. And just sort of on the theme of mosquitoes and things like that, we've also just had a couple of questions in here about yellow fever vaccination, whether that's compulsory for entry to either Botswana or Zambia. We had Kenya mentioned as well there, but I think it's pretty much the same for all of them really, isn't it? It's not actually compulsory, but is recommended. but not for people over the age of 60 generally, is my understanding. Is that right, Paul?
Well, I think for Botswana, it's only if you're going through an infected country. So if you're not going through an infected country, then yellow fever vaccination is not necessary for Botswana. And I think that's the same for Zambia as well. Gavin?
Yeah, Zambia is not recognized as having yellow fever, and so it's not a requirement for entry. But yes, of course, you do have to consider which countries you may pass through on the way to us. They may require it.
Great, excellent. I asked the experts there. You guys clearly know. That's brilliant. Thank you. So yeah, just a few more questions that we've had popping in here. So Paul, Mark Farrington has asked about camera battery charging facilities in the tents for those mobile camps that we use in Botswana.
Yeah, pretty well. All safari operators these days have to supply somewhere to charge batteries, and everybody's got mobile phones and digital cameras. So on the mobile camping safaris, you can't charge in your tent, but they have charging sockets in the vehicles that you can use to charge camera batteries and mobile phones. Normally recommend people to bring spare batteries with them or power banks and that sort of thing, because there's not normally enough charging facilities for everybody to charge at the same time. But there are charging facilities available throughout the safari.
Great, thank you very much. And another question for you here, Paul, about driving off-road in Botswana. Is that a possibility?
Not in the game reserves and national parks. You're not allowed to drive off-road there. In the concession areas, like quiet concession areas that are not protected by the national parks, I think there's a certain amount of off-road driving allowed, but try to restrict it as much as possible, just so we don't impact on the environment too much.
Great, lovely. And I think this one came in during the Zambia presentation, but I'm sure it probably does apply to both reptiles that we can be seen during these tours. Gavin, is there many reptiles to be seen in Zambia?
Yes. Obviously, the most obvious one that springs to mind is crocodile. The Luangwa River is chock full of crocodiles, and then a lot of other interesting things as well, from your monitor lizards and skinks and geckos, and then of course various species of snakes. I think we've got about 23 different species of snakes. They're not as easy to see as your buffaloes and your elephants, of course, but again. You want to be getting to them in the later in the season when things are getting warmer, because when your reptiles are going to be a lot more active. If you're coming June, July, a little bit too cold, they're not so obvious.
Great, thank you. And Paul, for Botswana, are they many reptiles?
It's the same, really. Yeah, very similar. For an interesting variety of lizards and snakes, but it's a treat to see a snake. Really, they're not easy to see at all. But really keen on reptiles, have a look at our reptile and amphibian holidays.
Thank you. And for our Botswana trip, how many birds might a typical group like to see? And how much more are you likely to get if you do an extension?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not really sure the numbers. I would have thought maybe a couple of hundred species on a Botswana trip, but that's a guess. I'd suggest have a look at our website. There are tour reports on the website which have a bird list at the end. But yeah, I would, as a rough guess, I would have thought a couple of hundred species would be typical of a 10-day safari to Botswana.
Fantastic. And giant kingfisher sounds to be a favourite of Andrew here. Is giant kingfisher something we're likely to see?
It's in the sort of Livingston, Big Falls area, and they can be seen there in the Okavango. I think they prefer the wetter areas rather than the drier forest. So in the wetter areas of Botswana, they're certainly possible.
Yeah, fantastic. And then back to flying insects. How we've got tsetse flies in South Luangwa. Are they a problem, Gavin?
I wouldn't call them a problem. They certainly are present. What we do to mitigate is we put a lot of black flags out, which bring the presence of the tsetse flies in and around camp. But it is possible that you can drive through a patch of fly because they've been following the buffalo or the elephant, and pick up few that follow the vehicle. So you will encounter them. but again, they're not unmanageable. A good repellent and long clothes. And in the case of tsetse flies, avoid your blues or black clothing. Will help to keep them at bay as well.
Great, thank you. No, that's brilliant. And then a nice question here from Peter Pilbeam about our carbon offsetting work that we're doing for these tours. Again, I don't know if Paul wants to sort of interject here at all, but sort of as with all of our group tours, for our carbon offsetting, we at Naturetrek will offer, we'll donate £15 from each of the tours and the long haul flights that you do to the World Land Trust. And that's part of a sort of carbon offsetting scheme we're part of at the moment, which is helping to protect a few areas of land in the world, including our Naturetrek Reserve in Ecuador. So we recently had a fantastic presentation in the office by our sustainability manager, Kerry. So if you've got any sort of specific questions about the Naturetrek Reserve, then do send them into the office and Kerry would be pleased to speak to you about that, or take a look at the sustainability pages on our website, which will give you a lot more information about the Naturetrek Reserve there. We've also got a Naturetrek Reserve in Abruzzo in Italy, which we helped purchase last year, and that's helping to protect some habitat for the Marsican brown bears there. So we've got sort of different projects on the go all the time as part of our carbon offsetting and sort of carbon sequestration that we've got. So. But lots of work ongoing in the background, and hopefully we'll have lots of news for you soon as well. I don't know if you've got anything further to add there, Paul. Have I missed anything or?
No, I think you've covered that very well. I would just second what Gavin says about the importance of ecotourism down in Southern Africa in particular. If it wasn't for the visitors, there probably wouldn't be all of these national parks there. It's so important that the visitors continue to come, bring their tourist dollars, and help to conserve the region.
Yeah, such an important point. Thank you, Paul. And another question is just coming from Sanjay about water-based activities in Zambia. Is that something that we'll be doing in South Luangwa, Gavin, or possibilities elsewhere in Zambia?
Not in the South Luangwa, particularly because the nature of the river, either it's really flooding or it's too shallow and windy. So water-based activities in South Luangwa, no. However, South Luangwa is just one of 20 national parks in Zambia. The other bigger ones, Lower Zambezi particularly, and the Kafue, as well as Mosio Tunya along the Victoria Falls, all have very good water-based activities, from angling to canoeing to sunset cruises, a whole variety of things that you can do on the water.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Lovely. So I think that's just about all the questions that we had this evening. So thank you very much to everybody for joining us. I've got some lovely comments here. I think you've been enjoying those presentations. So thanks for joining us. We'll have our next online presentation on the 25th of March, where we'll be taking you to the Pantanal, and that's our final event in the series. And for anybody sort of local to the Arundel area, do come and join us tomorrow night, where we'd be pleased to see you. I hope you've all got copies of your newsletters, which should have arrived sort of last week or so. But if you haven't got those yet, or you'd like us to post a copy, then please do just get in contact with the office, and we'll be happy to send those out to you. But unless anybody's got any further questions, that's great. Thank you very much for joining us, and thanks again to Paul and Gavin for a fantastic evening.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.